My name is John Dawson, and I was a beat cop for 22 years in a small town in rural West Virginia. People talk and stories get passed around, especially in a small town with few ears and big mouths. Sometimes the people knew a crime was going to happen before it would, and I was often warned to patrol certain houses for a while. Sometimes nothing happened, and sometimes I would break up a domestic disturbance. I never took it as a psychic thing, but just people who knew other people so well that they could spot the signs, like nosy old ladies with nothing better to do. I'm going to explain to you the oddest thing that I ever had to investigate, and it changed my life forever. Words are sometimes hard to find when you're talking about trauma, and this I know well from years on the force. The best way I can think of describing is that it was enormous and covered in gray fur, like a wolf, a werewolf. The night started off normally. I was driving around aimlessly watching for bad drivers and some other event that could randomly happen in a small, unknown town. The radio blared, making me jump a little since it had been quiet that night.
Unit 512, you close to Dempsey?
10-4, what's going on?
Neighbors have reported someone or something prowling around in the building. Possible 559.
559 means burglary. Oh joy, I was hoping it was some kid causing terror and not some armed, desperate lunatic trying to break into a gas station at 2 a.m. I drove over that way and searched around the building. In the grassless mud, I saw some enormous paw prints. They were bigger than my palm. Coyote prints aren't nearly that big, and wolves have been extinct in this area for over 100 years now. I thought maybe the coyote had sunk in the mud a little, so the prints spread out, but it didn't appear that way. Station, this is Unit 512, all clear.
10-4, Unit 512.
I chose not to mention the tracks I found, but it stayed in my mind. What could make those prints that big? Also, the callers thought it was a man. Otherwise, they probably wouldn't have bothered calling the police over some animal sniffing around a building. I went back to my aimless wandering of the roads, got some food from the fast food joint, and continued. I was parked by an empty car wash watching tractor trailers amble by every few minutes, eating my dinner. A flash ran past the passenger side door. Beside there was a vast empty parking lot that went to another street. I looked around and didn't see anything. Out of the driver's side door, I saw the biggest wolf I had ever seen, sitting on its haunches and staring at me. After a few seconds, it ran off behind a car wash and probably into the woods because it didn't come back. After snapping back to reality, I put the car in drive and headed down the road. I've been shot at by a drunken redneck hell-bent on getting revenge on his wife's lover, but even that didn't frighten me in the way that seeing that wolf frightened me. When you see something that you know for sure isn't an illusion or a trick of the light, your brain just has trouble accepting it. I drove around for a while, half expecting the thing to run out in front of my headlights.
Unit 512, there's a 1057 over on 22 Brooks Lane. Can you be over there in 5?
1057 means missing person. It was turning into a night for the record books. 10-4, be there as soon as I can. On came the lights and down went the accelerator. When I got there, I found a man and woman standing on the porch of their old coal camp house. The woman was crying with such fervor that I knew I wouldn't get much from her. The man was pacing. He was clearly distraught as well. Evening, folks. The man walked down and introduced himself as the husband. My daughter, Cassie. My wife went to check on her before she went to bed. Cassie's window was open. Some of the stuff in her room was knocked around like there was a struggle. Neither of us heard anything. I was writing all of this down in my notebook. I'd like to go look, if that's okay with you. Sure, no problem, officer. In the room, I found large claw marks under the window. From the pattern, you could assume this happened when it climbed back out. Quite a lot of her toys were knocked around and her bedding was essentially shredded. In disbelief, I stared. This was about 5 miles from where I had seen the wolf, but it was the first thing that popped into my head. I couldn't help but ask, "This looks like an animal got in here. Did you hear any howling?" "Yeah, I did. It sounded like one of my neighbor's dogs, so I didn't think of it." "What do you think it was?" "Not sure yet, but I'll add this to my notes. I'm gonna have some more people come by and look." After a couple of hours of checking the scene, the small forensic team left. They found some strands of thick, gray hairs around the room, but no blood. They told me they thought it was an animal too, but they need more evidence to officially call it that. I had about 3 hours left of my shift, so I went back to driving. I was driving along this section of town that used to be part of the coal mining community back in the early 1900s. A lot of the houses were dilapidated and left to rot by the coal companies. I drove past one when I saw something out of the corner of my eye. I stopped when I realized what it was. In between two abandoned houses, I saw the wolf sitting on its haunches with an unconscious girl in its jaws, grinning. That grin didn't appear to be an animal grin, but like a human. A human who was overjoyed in its success. My instinct was to give chase regardless if it was beast or man. With my Beretta, I went after the thing. I've never seen anything run that fast. In a flash, it was up an old oak tree. I didn't want to shoot because it had the girl and she might still be alive. "Little girl!" I couldn't remember her name. "Are you okay?" I yelled up the tree.
"No, she's not,"
said a gravelly voice back to me. Startled, I shouted, "You're a man?"
"Oh, yes. Yes, I am. This meal will fill you for a while, too, Officer Dawson. I can't wait."
From the top of the tree, it leaped across the backyard and into the hillside and bolted toward the peak. I fired 3 times but missed. It didn't take long for the wolf to climb over the peak and be out of sight. I was several yards from my car, so I grabbed my cell phone and called the station. "You won't believe this. I just saw the girl. She was in the jaws of some wolf-like thing."
Wolf-like thing?
The station officer asked. "Yes, it spoke to me. It knew my name."
Dawson, there's no way.
"I'm telling you, it did. It went up the hill behind the abandoned houses near the old Campbell mine camp."
I'll get a copter out there ASAP then. As for the wolf, I'll pretend that I didn't hear that. For your sake.
He said and hung up. They sent a copter out, and they did find the girl. Her midsection was devoured. Just bones remained from the chest down. The funeral was rough. The entire small police force that we had attended, and we saluted the girl as she was sent off into the great beyond. My wife handmade them a picture of the multiple pictures of their daughter, Cassie. She was Cassie's homeroom teacher, and she was absolutely destroyed by what had happened. It's been 5 years, and I still don't think she's completely over it. The last event to occur happened a week after. Chief Workman gave me a paid week off over the few days prior. The event of the vicious murder of Cassie had finally started to simmer down. I was cruising through the business section of town a little after midnight, looking the front and back ends of businesses.
Unit 512, come in.
"This is Unit 512. Go ahead."
I got a possible 187 down on the far end of Miller Hollow. A driver by said they thought they saw a body in the ditch and didn't want to investigate.
The 187 means murder. Dead body. Great. A good way to start things off after my mini vacation. 10-4, I'll go over that way now. Anxious, but I had a job to do. I went over there to the approximate area. I searched down the road they said the body was spotted, and I found it. The body was covered in deep slashes all over, and to top it off, the head was missing. I shined my flashlight around, trying to find a sign of what might have happened to the head. Several yards up the hillside, I saw a tall, naked man grinning at me. He took off running up the hill, and I never saw him again. The creepiest thing about him was those large, yellow eyes.